I'm really excited to be here personally to talk about a couple of things that are near and dear to my heart. That is agriculture and economic development. As mentioned, I come from West Kentucky, grew up in a farm family, and that's what I've done professionally for the past 7 years now. Have had the pleasure for the past 2 years to be a part of Mayor Linda Gordon's Office of Economic Development. That's been a new world for me to learn all about that and to undertake that role on behalf of the city. So we'll go ahead and get started first by taking a look at how agriculture in Lexington has changed and transformed, not just over the past 5 or 10 years, but over the past several decades, because it looks a lot different now than it used to, and that's true of many places in the state of Kentucky. So first, taking a look at the number of farming operations here in Lexington, you can see that there's been a decrease in those over the years, but when we start to look more specifically at the enterprises in those farming operations, so looking at how many farms raise cattle here in Lexington, that is a number that 40 years ago was over 400 and currently is under 150. And then, of course, looking specifically at tobacco operations, if you know anything about Kentucky agriculture, you're probably familiar with the decline of tobacco production here locally. That's something that has changed not just due to sweeping federal policy that has shifted during that time, but also due to the market itself. But just for context, again, the Ag Census in 1982 shows that Fayette County had over 700 tobacco farms during that time. Currently, that number is less than 10, and so a really dramatic shift in production. And I want to point out that those are farms that may not have necessarily ceased operation, but instead have diversified into other sectors as the market has changed. Looking next at acres of farmland, we see that that number has declined by about 25,000 acres over the past 40 or so years. But on the flip side of that, the average size of a farming operation here in Lexington has increased during that time. And so that's likely an indicator of consolidation. So we have fewer folks that are engaged in those very small farming operations, maybe more folks that are operating larger parcels of land at this point in time. And this bottom two numbers here are values of farm production between the two time periods. I've included on the slide that these are unadjusted for inflation, but if you did adjust them for inflation, you would see that those two figures are actually pretty consistent over time. Fayette County has always been a high-level farm producer in the state of Kentucky, and that is largely due to the value of equine that are produced here in Lexington. So we know that not every farm in Fayette County is a horse farm, but in terms of the farm revenue that's being driven out of those operations, that is the leading source of farm revenue here in the county. So I share all of those numbers just to give you a baseline for how agriculture has shifted over that time. Some of these are more so national trends and some of them are more localized. But again, looking at the fact that we've had a number of farms that is decreasing while the average size of the farm is increasing, that's something that has been seen across the country. We know that fewer folks are engaged in farming firsthand, and we know that farm operations are growing across the country. One thing I did want to point out that is a small exception to that rule, Brittany actually pointed this out to me, is that we've had a recent exception in that number of farms here in Fayette County, which is in the most recent USDA Ag Census, our number of farming operations actually increased, which is something that's fairly rare across the state, might be an indicator that we have new, younger producers that are entering the market for the first time, so I find that encouraging. But again, it is a nationwide trend that our total acreage of farmland is decreasing over time. Part of the reason for that is because farmers are able to be more productive on a smaller amount of acreage now. And so it doesn't require so much acreage to drive the production that it used to. And of course, acreage is lost to development. I know the Fayette Alliance is familiar with that fact. And then here in Kentucky, wanted to point out that we've had a steep decrease in certain enterprises of farm production, but that has been replaced by diversification in farm production. Kentucky used to be very dependent as a state on tobacco specifically. We don't have many folks engaged in that sector anymore, but for the most part, they've replaced it with something like poultry production. If you look out at the western part of the state where I grew up, it may even be livestock production, crop production of a different type. But in Fayette County specifically, what I hope you'll take from those farm revenue numbers that I shared is that Fayette County is consistently a top producer in farm revenue in the state of Kentucky. Typically, Lexington ranks in the top 5, if not the top 3 counties for farm revenue dollars, and that is driven largely by the equine income that's coming into the county. So now that we've kind of given that background and looked at where agriculture has come in the past 40 years, I want to get to the meat and potatoes of what I'm going to be talking about today, which is where do we go from here? What's the next big opportunity in agriculture? And of course, that's AgTech, the subject of my presentation today. Defining AgTech, agricultural technology, is a little bit tough. It looks different to everyone that you talk to, but it's one of those things that I tend to tell people you'll know it when you see it. So if I had to give a definition to AgTech, it would be the application of innovative technologies that are going to make farming more efficient, sustainable, or profitable for those operators. And I think an easier way to give context is to think about specifically what do AgTech products and services look like in the market. And some of these I know you all will be familiar with, things like robotics, drones. This is a picture here from one of my friend's farms in Shelby County, using those drones as kind of an assist to labor that may be missing from the farm these days. But it can also be less tangible than that. Things like software systems that are going to help farmers with decision making and analysis on their farm, or even things like biotechnology. We get into seed genetics and plant-based innovations, or even controlled environment agriculture, high-tech greenhouses. All of these things fall under that umbrella of AgTech. And I'll do my best to give a few more examples as we go throughout the presentation today, but hopefully that gives us a baseline to start with. So when we think about the opportunity for economic development through AgTech here in Lexington, I'd like to go back several years ago, before I was even in this role, to the kind of brainchild of my current boss, Mayor Linda Gordon. Mayor Gordon, several years ago, when she was first running for mayor, as several of you all will know, she's a proponent for agriculture. She understands the role that it plays in our local economy. And so she started thinking, how can we maximize the economic impact that we see from this sector? And her mind first went to those factors that I mentioned earlier. Lexington being a top ag producer in the state, the horse capital of the world, the booming economic impact that comes from production here. But there are also several other influences to consider, one of which is the academic and research environment that comes from UK, our host tonight. If you are not familiar, the university was actually founded as an agricultural land-grant institution and a research college for agriculture. So UK's roots are strong in ag. And the College of Agriculture at UK produces over 500 direct degrees into that workforce every year, along with innovation that is led by faculty research at the university. So they're a huge partner in this effort to grow AgTech locally. Alongside of that, if any of you all were, I believe at the last session, got to hear from Dr. Allison Davis. That was session 4, right? Okay. Dr. Davis probably shared with you that Lexington is a hub for agribusiness in the state of Kentucky. And so when we look at all of the different sectors that are involved in ag business, it could be retail, it could be farm inputs, it could be professional services. We know that we have several of those businesses located specifically in Lexington. This has always kind of been a hub for ag business across the state. And then finally, Lexington has somewhat of a background in general tech business and employment. When we think about the influence from businesses like IBM, Lexmark, we know we've had folks that have been trained and employed to work in tech businesses, and a lot of them have stayed here even as some of those larger employers may have changed form over the years. And so with all of that in mind, the mayor brought this vision to her campaign trail back in 2018 and said, I see opportunity for economic development in this ag tech sector. How can we make that a reality? And so around 2019, she started to convene kind of an informal partnership. She talked to then Dean Nancy Cox at the College of Agriculture at UK, then Commissioner Dr. Ryan Quarles at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and then President of AgTech, Dr. Pierce Lyons. These are all folks that had a shared vision with the mayor and also saw this opportunity. And so they said, what would it look like to maximize that opportunity for economic development here? So they spent a couple of years studying the landscape, commissioning studies, hiring consultants, and saying, what would it take to make Lexington and make Kentucky a true hub for ag tech development? And the work that went on during that time really precedes me, but I do want to say it was extensive. They talked to folks all across the state for several years. Basically, everyone was in agreement that this is a great opportunity that needs to be pursued, and they started to lay the framework for how could that actually happen. And then in 2022, they finally formalized that partnership, registered with the Secretary of State, and said, here's how we're going to support economic growth through ag tech. And the vehicle that is happening through is one that I'm hoping at least some of you are familiar with by this point in time. The Bluegrass Ag Tech Development Corp was born. And I want to say that, while I'm a member of the mayor's office, Bluegrass Ag Tech is something that exists separate from the local government. It's a standalone 501c3 nonprofit that our local government has supported and sees the opportunity in. But it's not just us, right? This is a true public-private partnership that has taken form and is now in action to support ag tech growth here, both in Lexington and across the state. So I want to say back in 2023, again, we're preceding my time with the local government just a little bit, but our Urban County Council approved $1 million of funding to be seed funding for this organization, both to propel its operations, to be able to pay folks to bring the business to life, but also to take the form of grant funding that would go out to ag tech businesses that are developing and growing here locally. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in just a minute. But again, other partners in the organization include the State Department of Agriculture. Commissioner Jonathan Schell is a board member of the organization. And through a pool of state funds that's known as the Kentucky Agricultural Development Fund, the state matched the city's $1 million in funding and said, we also believe that we should be funding grants to these ag tech businesses that want to come here to Kentucky and grow and also support our farmers at the same time. Another partner, the College of Agriculture, Food and Environment here at UK, has contributed not only office space to the organization at the Coldstream Research Campus, but was also really instrumental in building that framework and commissioning that research that went into the layout of the organization and the design of the grant program. And then finally, AgTech, now led by Mark Lyons, Pierce's son, is really what makes this a public-private partnership, because all of those other folks have some public component to their operations, right? AgTech, if you're not familiar, is a global agribusiness brand. I, back in January, had the chance to visit Vietnam, got to see an AgTech facility there. And so they truly have a worldwide reach, but are headquartered just down the road in Nicholasville. And AgTech has brought their expertise to the partnership as well, and is really working to make sure that the organization has what it needs in terms of branding, marketing, legal expertise, as well as being the true connector for the entrepreneurs in this space. And I would be remiss not to mention Bluegrass AgTech, again, standalone organization, has its own leader. I wish he could have been here tonight. His name is Jacob Ball. If any of you have had kids that have gone through the education system, I'm seeing some heads nodding, in recent years. Jacob spent 15 years as an ag educator here in Lexington. He developed the agricultural program at Carter G. Woodson Academy and joined Bluegrass AgTech as its executive director this summer. He has hit the ground running and has high aspirations for the organization. And I wish he was here to say thank you to. Jacob is in Disney World right now with his family. So I don't think he's going to hear this message personally, but he hears my thanks on many occasions. So moving on to talk about kind of the national landscape in this space. Bluegrass AgTech is not the first animal of its kind in the country. Other states, other localities, other coalitions have formed that have seen things like we've seen here in Lexington. They've said we have this strong agricultural production environment, we have a workforce that's equipped for this type of thing. How can we take advantage of it? So in places like New York, California, Tennessee, Indiana, you'll see other ag tech development hubs that have been pre-existing. But one thing that makes Bluegrass AgTech really unique here in Lexington are the specialized focus areas that developed as a result of that consultant work that I've mentioned. The Shellman Group specifically, in a commission study by UK, they really traversed the state, talked to farmers, talked to agribusiness owners, talked to policymakers, and said, where are the needs and the opportunities in Kentucky agriculture that are specific to our geography, that are, focused on our landscape here in Kentucky? And the Shellman Group developed these focus areas to say, this is where Kentucky ag producers could really use innovation, where that ag tech could be instrumental in change. So just to give you an example from the slide here, the solutions for mid-size farming. In Kentucky, in comparison with some other states, we don't have a lot of very large corporate farms. We are mostly a small and mid-size farming state. What that means for ag tech is that we need these technologies to be feasible for a smaller producer to integrate in their operation. They need to be affordable, they need to be efficient. So Bluegrass AgTech is going to be sure and invest in technologies that fit that criteria. Or the Kentucky tradition sector, things like that equine sector that's so important to us here in Lexington, or to the distilling sector that is increasingly using locally grown inputs in those bourbon products that everyone loves so much. How can we support technologies that are going to encourage innovation in those sectors? And so the focus areas are something that every grant applicant to Bluegrass AgTech has to align with and illustrate the impact that they're going to have on one of those areas. And to talk a bit more about these grants specifically, due to that focus area illustration, they are called challenge grants. We want folks to arise to that challenge of addressing one of those focus areas. The grants are an annual competitive application process. We've been through 2 rounds of these so far, hoping to announce the 3rd one before the end of the year. And they are awards of up to $100,000 per applicant, but they do have a matching funds requirement. We thought it was important that folks that are coming to the table for a project that they need funding for also have their own skin in the game from other sources. Largely, these grants are designed to impact very early stage startup ag tech businesses. So it's not likely, at least in its current form, that you'll see Bluegrass AgTech funding a mega ag business with 100 employees. We wanted to get into the companies early in their business cycle because that's where those studies found the most opportunity to have impact from that investment. And again, in addition to addressing one of those focus areas, applicants have to make a commitment to keep their business operations here, either in Lexington or in the state of Kentucky, for a defined period of time. We want them to employ Kentuckians and work with Kentucky farmers, and so that time commitment helps make that happen. So we, again, have been through 2 funding rounds of the Challenge Grant so far, and I'm very excited about the impact that these have had, not only on the businesses that they funded, but also on our Kentucky farmers. 10 different companies have been awarded through those 2 rounds for a grand total of grant funding of $925,000. And just like Kentucky agriculture is very diverse, these businesses have covered a very broad range of services and technologies that they're bringing to the farm. I've put up here the logos of all of our Lexington-based companies that have been awarded so far. And again, just to give you an example, to get back to that note of what exactly does AgTech look like. Parasite Systems here in Lexington is a company that has developed a machinery and software system that they sell to veterinary offices across the country. And the vets can take a sample from an animal, run it through that machine and that software. It uses AI to analyze and detect and diagnose parasites in that sample. And they're selling these machines to vet offices all across the country. Or to look at Orb Technologies. This is one of our most recent grant recipients. Orb is working to develop a building block, so a construction material that is actually derived from straw and grass crops here in Kentucky and utilizes the natural structural strength of those plants to bring strength and integrity to construction projects in a way that's not only ecologically sustainable, but it's also giving farmers a revenue source from something that they may have not been able to take advantage of before in their operations. So, you know, I think that what we really see from the companies that have been awarded is that oftentimes their benefits are extensive across the ecosystem. They're not just helping the farmer, but a lot of them have that sustainability goal that they're trying to reach as well. They're encouraging that within the market through their technology. And we have been able to collect some reporting from the very first round of grants that we made. Again, the second round, we just awarded those a couple of weeks ago, so we don't have numbers back from those folks just yet. But I think the numbers that we've seen from the first round of awards is very encouraging. Those companies, which are 6 across the state, have supported 56 jobs and created 12 new jobs during the period that they've had the grant funding. They have engaged in contracts for direct payments to Kentucky farmers of over $380,000. And the number that I'm really excited about is that $625,000 that originally went out the door to those 6 companies has been leveraged for nearly $7 million in follow-on investments, whether that be from other grant programs or from private investment sources. And that is really what we had hoped to achieve by making investment in early stage companies, is that the grants are powering these companies to the next level of their operations and giving them the chance to leverage investment from other sources that are also going to be pivotal to their business. So I just wanted to share a quick map of the impact of Bluegrass AgTech across the state so far. Again, Lexington has been the only local government that's invested in the initiative to date, and so several of our awardees are located here. But the other partners involved in the effort are certainly statewide in their outreach, and I think that that's illustrated by what you see here. We have a lot of gaps to fill in on this map, but truly the effort of Bluegrass AgTech is just getting started. And again, I know Jacob is looking forward to coloring in some more of this map over the next couple of years. So in terms of what's next for Bluegrass AgTech, as I mentioned, expanding that statewide engagement, reaching more companies in different spaces with that challenge grant programming, but also expanding the partnerships of the organization. Are there other folks that strategically could benefit from a better economic opportunity through AgTech here in the state of Kentucky. Jacob also has a vision to host some sort of an AgTech summit or showcase here in Lexington, which would give folks a chance not just here locally, but maybe even from other states and ecosystems to see what we're investing in and to see those technologies and how they're implemented on Kentucky farms, and then also seeking additional funding sources. I would say that the mayor is, she is committed to supporting this initiative long term, but it has also always been the long-term vision that this organization will find non-governmental funding sources at some point in time. It's one of those things that the more folks that we have in the boat, maybe the further we can all go together. So now that I've had a chance to talk about AgTech, about the Bluegrass AgTech initiative, I did just want to quickly hit on a couple of other initiatives and undertakings that come from my other colleagues at the City of Lexington. These are not my programs directly, but I thought that they were relevant as they pertain to the discussion on land use and economic development here tonight. So the first thing I wanted to share was the Purchase of Development Rights Program. And if you guys could just give me a quick hand raise, are you all familiar with PDR? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of hands up. That's good. That'll save me a little bit of time. If you have not heard of the Purchase of Development Rights before, it is a conservation easement program that brings permanent protection to farmland here in Fayette County. This is a program that first started back in 2000, and as you can see in the dark green shaded areas, has permanently protected quite a bit of farmland across the county so far. So PDR is kind of like our AgTech grants. It's an annual application process. It's totally voluntary. Farm owners would only enter into this if they were interested in participating themselves. But the way PDR works is it allows farm owners to sell the development rights from their farms to our local Rural Land Management Board, and in exchange, a permanent conservation easement is placed on that property to ensure that it's going to be in agricultural use forever. So this is something that's really unique. Lexington was the first local government in the state to implement a program like this. It's not the only one anymore, which I think is probably an indicator of the benefits. But again, PDR has been very successful so far, has protected over 33,000 acres of farmland here in the county, which is about a quarter of all the farmland that is out there. So that's really a large impact. The one that you may not have heard of, even if you are familiar with PDR, is the new Small Farm Program. This was something that was just approved by our Urban County Council earlier this year. So to participate in PDR, a parcel has to be at least 20 acres minimum. The Small Farm Conservation Easement Program allows for parcels as few as 10 acres to be placed under that conservation easement. So the hope is that this will help fill in some of those puzzle piece gaps that we see between the existing areas of PDR farms. The annual application cycle for that, I believe, is now closed. I think they said late fall, early winter, they may hope to open that one back up. But between these two programs, the ultimate goal is to conserve at least 50,000 acres of farmland here in Lexington. Again, we know that it's such an important driver for our local economy. I'm sure we'll talk about that more tonight. But if you or anyone you know may be interested in participating, you can reach out to Beth Overman, my colleague at the city. And then one last initiative that I wanted to touch on that I'm not sure if this ever gets brought in front of this audience or not, but it's the site development work that the local government is engaged in. So the two focuses right now specifically, and I'll step over to the map here because I think that's the easiest way to get your bearings. Up the right side here, we have Newtown Pike. On the left, we've got Georgetown Road, I-75 kind of running horizontally across the map here. But these are two separate site developments that the Urban County government has had ownership of since a land swap that occurred with the university several years ago. The first is the Coldstream Research Campus, which is right at the bottom of the map there. This is 50 acres of property that the Urban County government took ownership of. These were already build-ready sites, and we've had great success in locating research-based businesses on these sites. There are 4 sites still remaining for development at Coldstream specifically. And then the most recent one you all may have seen in the news earlier this summer is the Legacy Business Park. This is a 200-acre property. 135 of it is eventually going to be developed. This is the old UK dairy and poultry unit. Again, if any of you all have been out to that neck of the woods before. But eventually this will be 13 different build-ready sites that have flexible boundaries. This property will tie into the Legacy Trail and will be zoned for light industrial use. I bring this all forward to you, number one, to let you know that the city is engaged in these site development initiatives so that we can give new businesses a place to locate and grow here in Lexington. If you're looking for an expansion, if you're looking at Lexington from, I don't know, somewhere on the West Coast, here's an available property that you can build to your design and to suit your business. And I also just wanted to point out that it is a priority of the mayor's office that we encourage AgTech businesses specifically to locate in these properties as that AgTech initiative continues to grow. So just, again, an overall look ahead. The city is committed to continuing to support local agriculture, to encouraging innovative business development through those intentional site offerings, and also to embracing the natural economic development opportunity that AgTech represents for our locality. So with that, I think that's all I've got, and I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah, I can really appreciate this question because, as I mentioned, AgTech is not something that's always like super tangible or super front of mind when you think about what you would see when you drive out to a Kentucky farm. But one trend that we have seen in applicants to the Bluegrass AgTech grant program is that a lot of them are engaged in waste-related technologies. And when I say that, what I mean is all of the different things that happen related to the farm, we are not quite utilizing all of the product that is available at hand. So for example, our distilling industry, waste is a large concern in that industry. It takes a lot of corn to make a small amount of bourbon, and then you're left with this distiller's mash. It needs to go somewhere. It needs to serve some purpose. We've had a lot of applicants who are looking to address that need specifically, which would not only benefit the distilleries, again, it's got that ecological impact, and it also has a benefit to the Kentucky farmers who are producing that corn, or in some cases, who may be benefiting from the byproduct of that process. Right now, a lot of that corn mash goes as raw product to feed cattle across the state. But what if we could reformulate it? What if we could create fertilizer from that product instead and use that on a larger number of farms, and it wouldn't be so expensive to transport and things like that? Or another example that I'll give from one of our most recent round of grantees, a company called Canbowl down in the western part of the state. They are utilizing corn stover, which is literally the plant material that is left in the field after you harvest it. You run the combine through, you've still got stalks and scraps on the ground. They're taking that and repurposing it, pulping it, and making biodegradable food containers that are an alternative to plastics. And so really this idea of developing a circular economy and one that is more sustainable as a whole is certainly a trend that we've seen, and I think a unique sector of AgTech that could be targeted locally. Yeah, again, this question makes me laugh because when I first started this work, I'm trying to acquaint myself with all of the AgTech businesses that are here, what they do, And there was one that really surprised me, an awardee that we had by the name of Lepidext. If you go visit the Lepidext lab in Lexington, they are working in moths and insects. And that may not seem directly related to agriculture, but what they're doing is actually, it's a biotechnology where they have had, they recognize the problem with pests in corn and grain crops and recognize that there may be a desire to decrease the use of pesticides, traditional chemicals in the growing of those crops. And they figured out that they can sterilize the moths that become that pest and stop those parasites from reproducing more naturally than through traditional pesticide-based applications. It's something that, again, I don't know would have ever crossed my mind. I grew up on a farm. I never thought about what if we, tried to approach this from the biological level instead of from the chemical level. But that's what's really cool about AgTech, is that it can take so many different forms, and sometimes it surprises you in what those look like. I think that the first one, it's really important for us to right now to spread awareness of this initiative. And again, I want to emphasize that while the urban county government's dollars for Bluegrass AgTech stay here in Lexington, this is truly a statewide initiative. So if you know anyone who may be interested in this ecosystem, in what's happening, please tell them what I've shared with you tonight. Either myself or Jacob Ball would be happy to connect with them. Really getting that word out and starting to reach folks that are not just existing AgTech businesses here in Kentucky, but that may be operating in other states and looking for a chance to take their business to the next level. It's important for us to reach them right now because that's where we're going to see that impact from economic development. I don't have as much concrete information on. I guess to give a first-hand account, I'm an ag college grad who has stayed in Lexington since that time. I think we see that fairly commonly across the university system. We know that the university is bringing folks to Lexington from rural parts of our state, from other parts of the country. A lot of them fall in love with this place and want to stay here, but I don't have any data specifically about the ag college graduates to address that one. So this, we have not specifically approached any surrounding counties about the opportunity so far, but what I will say is that the mayor and I spent some time in Frankfort last week sharing this project with the, it's the summertime. It was an interim committee on agriculture that meets there in Frankfort. We got a very positive response and a high level of interest in this from the state legislators. A lot of them wanted to know, how can I bring this to my community? How can I introduce ag businesses in our area to this type of funding? And so that's been very encouraging. I think the organization is also looking for other folks that are invested in Kentucky agriculture as a whole, again, that are non-governmental, that may be able to benefit from innovation in this area. Another good question, and one that I don't know if I'm fully equipped to answer, to be honest with you. I'm trying to learn more about tech in general, outside of the AgTech side of things, as an economic development tool here in Lexington. What I will say is that we've seen AI technologies being applied through a number of the applications that we've received, but I may not be as familiar with the larger ecosystem of AI here locally. Overall, we're just hopeful that we can introduce new technologies that are going, again, to bring a benefit to our local farmers. And I think we all know that AI it's going to be a part of the future of business operations. And so we're certainly starting to see AgTech address that venture and how that's going to come together.